Millionaire CEO was empty inside until a poor girl selling water changed everything. If you think I'm going to beg for $2, you can keep your spit. I want my water back. The words hung in the air like heat rising from the pavement. He hadn't meant to stop. Dylan Mitchell, a man whose time was worth more than most people's yearly rent, was supposed to be on his way to a board meeting. His suit was pressed, his mind focused, his life perfectly in order. But she caught his eye, a girl in frayed jeans and a faded gray t-shirt, holding a bottle of water like it was made of gold. Her dark hair was twisted in a messy knot, her shoulders sunburned, but her eyes burned colder than his own. She stood her ground against a man twice her size, demanding he either pay or spit the water back into the bottle. And when the man stormed off, humiliated by her mouth and her fire, Dylan didn't move. He watched, and when she finally noticed him just standing there, staring, she raised an eyebrow. "You want water too? Or are you here to lecture me?" That was the first time she made him feel something. The heat between us wasn't just the sun. The next morning, Dylan Mitchell sat alone in a corner office, 50 floors above the chaos of the streets below. His coffee had gone cold. He was the kind of man who made billion-dollar deals before breakfast. He didn't waste time. He didn't hesitate, and yet, he couldn't stop thinking about her. The girl with sunburned cheeks and a voice sharp enough to cut glass. The girl who sold water with the kind of passion most people didn't give their dreams. Sophia Carter. She had no idea who he was, and if she did, she hadn't cared. She hadn't flinched when he pulled out a $100 bill. She hadn't softened when he offered to buy her entire cooler. If anything, she looked at him like he was the one standing on the sidewalk. Meanwhile, 2 blocks from his office, Sophia dragged her cooler across cracked pavement. Her fingers blistered and raw. She still had rent to pay, tuition overdue, and a mother who couldn't work anymore. She didn't have time for games, especially not from some stranger in a tailored suit with soft hands and unreadable eyes. But she couldn't shake him. The way he looked at her, not like a man who wanted to save her, but like a man who finally saw her, and that unsettled her more than anything. That night, she sat at the kitchen table, sorting cash, mostly crumpled bills and quarters. Her grandmother's old voice drifted from the next room, humming softly through the walls. Sophia stared at the $100 bill he'd given her. She hadn't told anyone. She didn't know why she hadn't spent it yet. Maybe because it didn't feel like money. It felt like a question she hadn't figured out how to answer. Back in his glass kingdom, Dylan stood before the window, looking down at the street corner where he'd first seen her. A girl who stood up to a man twice her size. A girl who sold water like it was her purpose, not a hustle. She hadn't asked him for anything, and maybe that's why he wanted to give her everything. The next afternoon, he went back. No agenda, no speech, no plan. She saw him and shook her head. "You again?" He smiled. "I bought your water, not your goodbye?" She crossed her arms. "You keep showing up, Dylan Mitchell, but I still don't know why. Are you here to help me? Or are you just lonely?" Chapter 1. $2 of Pride. She could feel the heat rising off the sidewalk, curling around her ankles like smoke. Sophia Carter shifted her weight from one foot to the other and waved a bottle in the air. Ice-cold water. "Just $2. Beat the heat. Hydrate or faint." Her voice rang through the block, sharp and familiar to every local who passed her corner. The cooler beside her was nearly empty. A good sign, a small victory. But she still needed to sell 5 more bottles before she could buy groceries and afford the subway pass for the week. She turned as a middle-aged man in slacks approached, sweat clinging to his shirt like regret. $2, she chirped, handing him a bottle. He cracked it open without a word, took a long sip, and smirked. "This crap costs half that at CVS." Sophia didn't blink. "Then go to CVS. Don't get smart with me. Little girl, you're hustling people." She stepped forward, face taut but calm. "I carried this cooler 6 blocks in 95-degree heat. I shout for 5 hours straight. I miss class to stand here and earn every damn cent. That's not a hustle. That's called work," he scoffed, tossing the bottle back onto her table. "You think you're tough?" She didn't flinch. "You already drank half. If you're not paying, spit it back out and give it back to me. Laughter erupted from nearby pedestrians. The man flushed crimson. You're crazy. Sophia raised an eyebrow, still waiting for my water. He threw 2 crumpled bills at her feet and stormed off. Sophia exhaled slowly, picked up the bills, and dropped them into her cash box. Behind her, someone clapped once. She turned around, ready to snap but froze. There he was again, the suit, the perfect posture, the eyes that didn't blink. Dylan Mitchell. The first time he'd shown up, he hadn't said much, just bought every bottle she had and left with a strange smile, like he was testing something. Now, he was back. She narrowed her eyes. Didn't get enough last time. He looked down at the cooler. How many you got left? 3. I'll take them. She grabbed the bottles, set them in a neat little row, then folded her arms. You got a weird hobby or something? He slid a crisp $20 bill across the table. Call it repeat investment. She took it slowly. You got a name, or should I just call you Mr. Water Guy? Dylan. He didn't offer a last name. She didn't ask for one. Dylan, she said, testing it on her tongue, like a word she wasn't sure she wanted to keep. You planning on buying out all the vendors in the city? Or am I just your pet project? His gaze didn't waver. You don't strike me as anyone's project. Good, she said, because I don't need saving. He nodded once. Didn't say you did. And just like that, he turned, walked back to a black car parked on the corner, and placed the bottles in the passenger seat like they were wine. She watched him go, annoyed at how he didn't explain himself, annoyed that she cared. That night, in her tiny bedroom, Sophia lay on her side staring at the ceiling fan spinning above her. She couldn't sleep. Her thoughts kept rewinding to that moment, to that look. Most men looked at her body. This one looked at her like she was a puzzle, and she didn't like being figured out. Dylan sat in his office the next morning with a view that stretched past bridges and skylines, but he couldn't stop thinking about a woman on a sidewalk. He didn't know why she stuck with him. He'd met models, moguls, heiresses. None of them had looked him in the eye and said, "You don't scare me." Sophia hadn't said those words out loud. She didn't have to. He picked up his phone, paused, then set it down again. No assistant, no background check, no moves. He was going to do this the hard way. 2 days later, she saw him again. He didn't speak at first, just bought 1 bottle, handed her a 10, and waited. Keep showing up like this, she muttered. People are gonna think we're dating. He shrugged. Let them. Is that a threat or a promise? He smirked, but said nothing. When she got home that night, her grandmother was watching Jeopardy! On the old TV. Sophia dropped the day's earnings on the counter and went to the sink to scrub the grime off her hands. Sell out? Elena asked without turning her head. Almost. One rich guy keeps throwing 20s at me like it's Monopoly money. Her grandmother glanced over, amused. And what do? I take the money, then insult him. Elena chuckled. Sounds like love. Sophia threw a towel at her. But that night, when Sophia opened her worn-out wallet and saw Dylan's bill tucked between old receipts, she didn't throw it out. She folded it, smoothed it, pressed it between the pages of her notebook, and tried not to wonder why. He never asked for her name, but he already knew her worth. Chapter 2. The Man in the Suit. The sun was cruel that afternoon. It didn't shine, it seared. Sophia's cooler had started to sweat long before she did. The ice was nearly gone, and her voice had started to crack from shouting her usual chant. Ice-cold water, $2. Don't collapse on the sidewalk. She never expected to see him again. But there he was, across the street, leaning casually against a streetlight, like he wasn't wearing a suit that probably cost more than her entire semester of tuition. He didn't move, just watched. She narrowed her eyes, shading her forehead with her hand. Are you gonna buy something? Or are you just here for the free entertainment? He crossed the street without answering. Sophia's chest tightened, not because she was scared, she never was, but because she hated the feeling of not knowing what someone wanted, especially someone like him. Dylan Mitchell stopped 3 feet from her and slid his hands into his pockets. Relax. I'm not here to buy the whole cooler. Good, she said, grabbing a bottle and setting it on the table between them. Because I'm not in the mood to be rescued. He studied her face. Not the kind of look that lingered inappropriately. It was more surgical, like he was trying to understand the shape of her anger, not avoid it. You always this defensive with your customers. Only the ones in $1,000 shoes, she said flatly. What are you doing here? Dylan. He didn't smile this time. Curious. About you. Sophia blinked. That wasn't the answer she expected. Not even close. Right. Because CEOs usually hang out with broke girls who yell on street corners. You're not broke, he said calmly. You're invested. She couldn't help the laugh that escaped. Invested in what? Exactly. Your own survival. For a moment, the world slowed. The honking taxis, the barking dogs, the chatter of passers-by, all of it faded. Because the way he said it soft, but certain made her feel something she hadn't felt in years. Seen. She shook it off. I don't do charity, she snapped. So if this is some savior complex thing, just walk away. I don't do charity either, he said. I do strategy. She hated how calm he was, how unshaken, how nothing she threw at him seemed to stick. Then maybe strategize how not to creep people out. You showing up randomly? It's weird. He nodded once, slowly. Fair enough, but he didn't leave. That evening, Dylan sat at his marble kitchen island, untouched dinner in front of him. His penthouse was everything a man like him was supposed to want. Sleek furniture, priceless art, floor-to-ceiling views of Manhattan, but it felt hollow. He couldn't stop thinking about how Sophia looked at him like he wasn't impressive, like she didn't care about anything he owned, and somehow, that was the most intimate thing he'd felt in years. He pulled out his phone, opened his calendar, then closed it. He wanted to see her again, not as a plan, just as a man. Sophia didn't sleep much that night. She tried to read for her upcoming anatomy exam, but her mind kept drifting. Not to his money, not to his car, but to his words. You're invested in your own survival. No one had ever said that to her before. Not like it was something to be proud of. People usually saw her as a burden, a hustle, a girl trying too hard. But he hadn't looked at her like a project. He looked at her like she made sense, and that scared her more than anything. The next morning, he was back. Sophia saw him before he even crossed the street. She groaned and looked away, but it was too late. He stopped beside her stand, cooler still full, and gave a small nod. No cooler today. I didn't come for water, he said. Oh, great. That means you're here to annoy me. He didn't argue. I was thinking, he said slowly, since you're in business, we should have a business meeting. She raised a brow. Excuse me, dinner, just to talk. She laughed, short and sharp. Are you asking me on a date? He tilted his head. If you want to call it that. Sophia crossed her arms. You must be joking. Why? Because guys like you don't ask girls like me to dinner. And if they do, it's not because they want to talk. Dylan didn't smile. I don't care about what guys like me do. I care about what I want to do. And what? You just do whatever you want. He looked at her. Serious. Most people do. They just pretend they don't. Sophia blinked. It wasn't arrogance. It was honesty, and it pissed her off. You think you can just walk into someone's life and… what? Win them over with $100 bills and confidence. No, he said. I think I can walk into someone's life and show up. That's it. She didn't know what to say. He stepped back. Think about dinner. I don't need to, she said quickly. The answer's no. He nodded once. No anger, no drama. Then he pulled out a 20, set it gently on the table, and picked up one water bottle. For the road. He didn't look back when he left. That night, Sophia couldn't sleep again. But not because of nerves or guilt. Because she kept replaying the way he hadn't argued, hadn't pushed, hadn't begged. And somehow, that made her want him to come back even more. He left without a fight, and that's when she realized she wanted him to fight for her. Chapter 3. Your debt is paid. The line at the bursar's office was longer than usual. Sophia shifted from foot to foot, thumb running circles over the worn strap of her bag. Her bank account balance was a joke. Her shoes had a rip near the heel, and midterms were coming fast. She clutched a folded sheet of paper, her tuition notice. 3 months overdue. She was here to beg for an extension, maybe work out a payment plan. Pride was good on the street corner, But in a university office, it didn't keep the doors open. When it was finally her turn, the woman behind the glass barely looked up. Name: Sophia Carter. Keys clacked. A pause. Then the woman blinked. Huh. Sophia tensed. What? There's no outstanding balance under your name. Her heart skipped. I think there's a mistake. The woman frowned, clicked again, then leaned closer to the screen. Nope. Everything's settled. You're paid through the end of the semester. Sophia stared at her. Numb. That's impossible. It says here it was paid 2 days ago. Anonymous donor. Everything inside her stilled. She didn't need a name. She already knew. 20 minutes later, she was storming down Fifth Avenue. Her anger pulsed through her chest like a second heartbeat. She didn't care how tall the building was. She didn't care how expensive the marble floors were. She didn't care that the receptionist tried to stop her. She marched straight into Mitchell Enterprises like it was her house. The woman at the front desk blinked. Excuse me, miss, he's expecting me. Sophia snapped. He's not. I'll wait. She folded her arms and sat down in the middle of the lobby, surrounded by suits, phones, and judgment. Dylan found out within 5 minutes. He looked up from his email, brow raised. She said what? She's downstairs. His assistant said, nervous, and she won't leave. Dylan stood. Of course she wouldn't. He took the elevator down himself. When the doors opened, there she was, arms crossed, fury in her eyes, fire in her spine. Sophia, he said calmly. She stood. We need to talk. He nodded, gestured to the elevator. They rode up in silence, the kind of silence that felt like a held breath before a storm. In his office, she didn't sit. She turned to face him as soon as the door clicked shut. You paid my tuition. He didn't deny it. You had no right. I know. Then why the hell did you do it? He met her eyes. Steady? Because I wanted to. Same words, same tone, same unbearable calm. Sophia felt her throat tighten. You don't get to decide what I need. I didn't, he said. I just took away one thing that was breaking you. She stared at him, jaw clenched. I would have figured it out. I know. I would have worked 3 jobs if I had to. I know that too. Then why? Because, he said, his voice dropping low. You shouldn't have to drown just to prove you can swim. Something inside her broke. Tears pressed at the edges of her vision. Hot and unwelcome. She turned away, trying to collect herself. But he spoke again. This wasn't pity. It wasn't control. I didn't do it to impress you. I did it because I care. She spun around. No, you don't get to say that. You don't even know me. Dylan stepped forward slowly. I know what it's like to be alone in a room full of people. I know what it's like to do everything by yourself. Because no one ever shows up. She blinked. He didn't look away. You're not the only one with pride. Sophia, mine just wears better shoes. A silence fell between them. The kind that didn't feel empty, just heavy. Finally, she whispered. You're unbearable. He stepped closer. And you're impossible. Her breath caught. His voice softened. But I like impossible. She looked at him. Really looked at him, and for a second, something shifted. But she couldn't let it stay. She turned toward the door, yanked it open, and paused just long enough to say, this doesn't mean anything, Mitchell. And then she was gone. Downstairs, she burst through the revolving door into the street. The sun had disappeared behind a thick wall of gray clouds. The air smelled like rain. She pressed her back to the building, breathing hard, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. She hated how relief felt like betrayal. She hated that he saw through her. She hated that he was right. But what she hated most was that part of her didn't want him to stop. He crossed the line not with money, but with care, and that's what terrified her most. Chapter 4. Waterproof walls. The rain came down hard the next day. Not the gentle kind, but sideways wind and fat drops that soaked through denim in seconds. Sophia stood under a barely functioning awning near her usual corner, her cooler tucked tight against her legs. She should have gone home, but she needed the cash. And maybe though she'd never admit it, she wondered if he'd show up again. He didn't, not that day. By nightfall, she was shivering on the subway, soaked down to her socks, gripping a soggy $10 bill like it was her last lifeline. The city felt colder than usual, or maybe she just missed feeling seen. The next afternoon, he was there. No umbrella, no suit jacket, just standing across the street again, hands in his pockets, eyes on her. Sophia rolled her eyes. "What now?" she muttered under her breath. He crossed the street, stepping through puddles like they weren't there. "Looks like business is slow," Dylan said. "You think?" He reached into the cooler, grabbed a water, and held out a 5. "No tips," she said. He handed it over anyway. She snatched the bill and dropped it in her box. But he didn't leave. "You came back," she said finally. "You expected me not to. I thought guys like you didn't do rejection." Dylan shrugged. "Depends on who's doing the rejecting." Her arms folded tightly. "If you're here to play games, go find someone who's bored." "I'm not playing," he said. "I just keep thinking about you." She didn't respond. He stepped closer, tone softer now. "You're angry I paid for your tuition," she scoffed. "You think, but you're not returning the check," she glared. "You're angry I helped, but not because I helped. You're angry because you needed it." That hit too close. "Go to hell. Already live there," he said, almost too quietly. For a moment, they just stood there under gray skies and flickering street lamps. Two people who didn't know how to love without a fight. The rain returned fast. Thunder cracked low above the skyline. Sophia cursed under her breath, yanked the cooler shut, and turned to leave, but not fast enough. A black car pulled up beside her, window lowering. "Looks like you're about to get soaked again," Dylan said from behind the wheel. "I can walk. You'll drown. I've walked in worse." He paused. "Just for today. Let me drive you." She hesitated, not because she didn't want to, because part of her did, and that terrified her more than the rain. She yanked open the door and climbed in. "But if you start giving me lectures about my life choices, I'm getting out halfway." He smirked. "Deal." His car smelled like leather and quiet wealth. Sophia sat stiffly, cooler between her legs, trying not to drip on the console. They drove in silence for a few blocks. "You always liked the sound of your own thoughts this much?" she asked finally. He didn't look away from the road. "I like the sound of yours better." Sophia turned her head toward the window, so he wouldn't see the heat rise in her cheeks. The car sputtered. She glanced over. "What was that?" Dylan frowned, tapped the dashboard, then silence. The engine stalled completely in the middle of an empty intersection. Sophia bit back a laugh. "Seriously? I don't understand." "Oh no!" The luxury car broke down. The horror. Dylan shot her a look. "You're enjoying this." "A little." The rain pounded harder against the roof. "We'll wait for the driver," he muttered, checking his phone. Or, she pointed to a nearby hot dog stand beneath an awning. "We could survive like peasants." He hesitated, then followed. Minutes later, they sat on a rickety bench with paper-wrapped hot dogs in their hands. Sophia devoured hers like a starving kid. Dylan stared at his like it might bite back. "You've never had one." "Not sober," she burst out laughing, ketchup smearing the corner of her lip. He watched her, not the mess, not the food, just her. The way her eyes lit when she laughed, the way her guard slipped when she forgot to hold it. "You look surprised," she said. "I just never pictured you eating like this." "And what? You thought I was all sarcasm and street hustle?" "No," he said. "I thought you were strong, but I didn't know you were this human." Sophia blinked, and in that tiny, quiet moment, she looked at him differently too, not as a CEO, not as the man who paid her tuition, but as a man who didn't run when her walls went up. Back in the car, after the tow truck came and left, they sat in the soft hum of silence. She turned to him. "Why do you keep showing up?" He looked at her like she already knew. "Because I haven't stopped thinking about you since the moment I saw you on that sidewalk." Sophia's chest ached. She didn't want this. She didn't need this. But God, she wanted to believe it. Sometimes the walls we build to protect ourselves are the same ones keeping love out. Chapter 5. The Gossip and the Socialite. Sophia didn't like dressing up. She didn't like the way mirrors caught her off guard, or how heels made her walk like she didn't belong. She liked calloused hands, clear intentions, and clothes that could survive a New York downpour. So when the university fundraiser came up, and her professor insisted she attend, it's good exposure. Sophia, donors love a hard-working story. She nearly said no, but she needed the scholarship extension, and more than that, She needed the reminder that she was still moving forward, that despite everything, the debt, the broken pipes, the quiet glances exchanged in black cars, she was still climbing. She wore a navy dress borrowed from a friend, nothing dramatic, just clean lines and soft fabric. Her hair was pinned up, her pride tucked behind her teeth. When she walked into the event hall, she felt the shift instantly. Eyes flicked toward her, some curious, some amused, some dismissive. She was used to being underestimated. She just hadn't expected to be so visible. Across the room, Dylan Mitchell entered like silence. No announcement, no attention-seeking, but everyone noticed him. The crowd shifted. Conversations paused mid-sentence. A ripple passed through silk dresses and cufflinks, like a breeze through glass. And Sophia, despite herself, stared. He looked untouchable. Sharp suit, controlled gaze, the kind of presence that didn't beg for attention, but stole it anyway. When their eyes met across the room, her stomach tightened. She turned away too fast. She didn't want this. She didn't want him here. But he was already walking toward her. "Wasn't expecting you," she said, as he reached her. "I was invited." "Right. Of course. Billionaires get invites everywhere." "You look," he stopped, as if choosing his words carefully. "Different." She raised an eyebrow. "That a compliment?" "It's the truth." They stood in silence, the tension between them tighter than any ballroom violin string. That's when she appeared. Naomi Stanford, blonde, bold, beautiful in the curated, terrifying way of someone born into money and trained to wield it like a sword. Her heels clicked too loudly for a carpeted floor. She didn't look at Sophia, only Dylan. "Darling," she purred, ignoring the electricity between them. "Didn't know you'd be here? Or is this one of your little philanthropy projects?" Sophia's spine stiffened. Dylan's jaw tightened. "Naomi." Naomi turned, finally acknowledging Sophia with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "So you're the girl, the one selling water in Midtown?" Sophia's voice was quiet but firm. "Do we have a problem?" Naomi gave a short laugh. "Oh, not at all. I just didn't expect someone like Dylan to be interested in..." She tilted her head. "Someone so local." Sophia didn't blink. "And yet, here we are." Naomi looked to Dylan for backup. "Really? This is your type now?" Dylan stepped forward. His tone was ice. "Be careful." "Naomi," she blinked. "You're used to getting your way, but not with me. Not anymore." The smile disappeared from Naomi's lips, and suddenly, she was just a woman who'd lost the war before it even started. She turned and disappeared into the crowd, heels still too loud, silence trailing behind her like smoke. Sophia exhaled slowly. "I can fight my own battles, you know." "I know," Dylan said. "Then why?" "Because you shouldn't have to." She hated how those words cracked something inside her. Later that night, she stood near the catering table, watching him from across the room. He wasn't looking at anyone else. And when their eyes met again this time, she didn't look away. But the whispers had already started. By the next morning, her name was on more lips than she cared to count. In the university hallway, "That's the water girl." "Right." On the subway, "That CEO, he's messing with her." "Right." "No way, it's real." She heard her name everywhere but her own life. And when someone posted a photo of her and Dylan standing close at the fundraiser, captioned, "From sidewalk to suite, how to sell water and catch a billionaire," her chest burned. It wasn't just rude, it was cruel. Because no one saw her. They only saw who they thought she was. By noon, she was back at Mitchell Enterprises. She didn't wait for security or reception. She walked straight into his office. Dylan looked up, surprised. "Sophia." She shut the door behind her, crossed her arms. "Why is everyone talking about me?" He paused. "Because Naomi's a snake, and you let her talk." "I didn't." "I told you," she snapped, voice shaking. "I didn't want to be a part of your world, and yet every time I turn around, I'm dragged deeper into it. I didn't leak anything. I didn't invite the gossip. I didn't. But you didn't stop it either." He stood. "What do you want me to do?" "I want to be invisible again," she whispered. And the silence that followed wasn't angry. It was full of grief, because they both knew she couldn't be. "Not anymore." He stepped forward. "Do you care what they say?" She bit her lip. "Of course I care." "Then tell me this," his voice low, almost breaking. Is the problem what they're saying, or the fact that you feel something for me and you don't know what to do with it? Tears pressed at the edge of her throat. She wanted to say he was wrong, but he wasn't, and that terrified her most of all. So she turned, reached for the door. His voice stopped her. If you want to go, go. She paused, hoped just for a second he would stop her, but he didn't, and somehow that hurt more than anything. She walked away, and he let her, but neither of them really left. Stoppity-tyken. The man who let her leave. She didn't slam the door. That almost made it worse, because Sophia Carter was the kind of girl who slammed doors, snapped back, threw verbal punches when she felt cornered. But this time, she just walked away, and Dylan didn't move, didn't call her name, didn't follow, didn't say wait. He stood at the edge of the silence, one hand on the back of the chair she always refused to sit in. He had never felt smaller. Sophia didn't cry in the elevator, not in front of the assistant who offered her a polite smile, not in the marble lobby, where polished shoes clicked past her like she didn't exist, not even outside on the steps, where the city hummed and no one cared what she felt. But when she got home alone, shoes kicked off. Back against the door, she slid to the floor and let the tears come. Because pride was heavy, because dignity didn't hug back, because she had never let anyone help her without it feeling like a transaction, until him, and that terrified her. Dylan sat in his office long after the lights had dimmed and the hallway buzz had died down. The skyline blinked outside the glass wall like a distant universe he no longer wanted. He ran his hand over his face. She was gone, and he had let her go because he didn't want to cage her. But freedom, he was starting to learn, didn't mean letting someone walk away when they were begging silently, stubbornly to be chased. The days that followed moved in slow, aching silence. Sophia stopped checking her phone, stopped hoping to see him waiting by the corner. He didn't come, not to buy water, not to apologize, not to argue, and that gutted her more than anything he could have said. Because deep down, she was hoping he would fight for her, even when she told him not to, even when she acted like she didn't care. She was used to people leaving, but she wasn't used to missing them after they did. Dylan tried to stay focused. Meetings, contracts, numbers, but her voice lived in the quiet. Her fire, her sarcasm, her god-awful stubbornness. She haunted the spaces between sentences. And still, he didn't go back, because he was afraid that one more step toward her would break whatever dignity she had left. Afraid that love, when wielded without permission, could still feel like control. One night, he called her number, watched it ring, hung up before the third tone. Sophia, meanwhile, worked harder than ever. She picked up a second shift at the restaurant, started skipping lunch to study between water sales, pushed herself until she was so tired, she stopped thinking, stopped remembering, or at least tried to. But some nights, when she walked home past the dark windows of fancy condos, she wondered if he was still watching her from behind one of those walls of glass. She wondered if she had made a mistake. Then one evening, something changed. It started with a whisper at the restaurant. "Did you hear? The manager's gone." Sophia turned her head. "What?" "Fired this morning, out of nowhere. Some kind of review from corporate." Her heart picked up speed. The man who'd insulted her every shift gone. Just like that, and in his place, a new manager, gentle, respectful. "If you need time off for your night classes," he told her, "just let me know." Sophia stared at him, speechless. Something felt off. A week later, the leaky pipe in her mother's apartment, the one the landlord had ignored for months, was fixed overnight. No note, no explanation, just silence and clean tile. And the final straw came when she went to double-check her tuition balance online. It was paid. Again. This time through the end of the year, her throat closed. No, not again. She stormed out of class, heart pounding, dialed before she could think. He answered on the third ring. "Sophia." Her voice was sharp. "Don't play innocent. I assume this isn't a thank you call." She exhaled shakily. "Why do you keep doing this?" His voice on the other end was steady. "Too steady. Because I can." "That's not a reason." "It is to me." There was silence. "I never asked you," she said finally, "for any of this. And I never asked for permission to care. Her hands trembled. You're impossible. And you're infuriating. But his voice had changed now. Softer, a thread of longing bleeding through the armor, and she hated how she didn't want to hang up. That night, she stood on the sidewalk longer than usual. No cooler, no yelling, just waiting. She didn't know what for. Maybe for him to show up again. Maybe for her heart to stop fighting what it had already decided. But he didn't come, and that was the cruelest part. She had walked away, but maybe he had too. And now the space between them wasn't silence, it was regret. Chapter 7. He never stopped watching. Sophia Carter didn't believe in second chances. Not because she didn't want to, but because life had taught her they rarely came without strings. So when things started getting easier, she didn't smile. She got suspicious. Her shifts were smoother now. The new restaurant manager treated her with respect, even offered to adjust her schedule to fit her classes. At home, her mother's medical bills had mysteriously dropped in total a paperwork error. They were told, and her university, a letter arrived in the mail. She'd been nominated for an academic grant, a grant she never applied for. Sophia stood in her tiny kitchen that night, clutching the envelope like it might bite. "I don't get it," she whispered. Her mother, seated at the table with a steaming mug of tea, just smiled gently. "Maybe the world's finally catching up to what you deserve." But Sophia wasn't naive. She knew who was behind it. She could feel his fingerprints on every blessing that appeared out of thin air. He hadn't called. He hadn't texted. He hadn't shown up on the sidewalk again. But he was there, everywhere. And that was the part that broke her, because it meant he still cared. But he wasn't coming back, miles away. Dylan sat at his desk at Mitchell Enterprises, staring at the last photo his assistant had quietly delivered Sophia, handing a water bottle to a man in a wrinkled shirt. Her smile tired but real. "She's doing okay." The assistant had said, "Better." "But she looks lonely." Dylan had nodded once, then dismissed him. Because what could he do? He had already crossed the line too many times. She had made it clear. She didn't want help. She didn't want him pulling strings. She wanted air. She wanted space. So that's what he gave her. But space, he was learning, had a bitter aftertaste when love had already bloomed. He went to sleep each night, wondering if she still thought about him. He woke up each morning wishing he didn't. Sophia kept selling water. Same corner, same routine. But the days felt thinner without him. Even his silence had weight. And the worst part, she missed his arrogance, his impossible calm, his way of listening without needing to fix. One morning, the city hummed beneath gray skies, and the cooler felt heavier than usual. She was setting up when a customer approached, tall, lean, unfamiliar. "2 waters," he said. She handed them over, distracted. He held out a 20. No change needed. She looked up and froze. It wasn't Dylan, but it was his money. Crisp, unmarked, folded the way he always did. "Did someone send you?" she asked, voice low. The man shrugged. "Just thirsty." But she knew. She always knew. Later that day, Sophia found herself in the university library pretending to study, failing. She scrolled through old texts she never deleted. His name still sat there. Dylan Mitchell. The last message he'd sent read, "You deserve more than survival." And she hadn't replied. Not because she didn't want to, but because she didn't know what to say. Back in his office, Dylan stood by the window, watching the same city he used to feel so far above. Now it felt enormous and empty. He'd never told anyone about her. Not his board. Not his family. Not even the social circles that had started whispering. Let them whisper. Let Naomi run her mouth. He didn't care anymore. The only voice that mattered wasn't speaking to him now. Until one night, a thunderstorm hit the city. Not rain, but wind. Power outages. Subway delays. Sophia was stranded after her shift, soaked to the bone. Cooler full. Streets nearly empty. She stood under a flickering lamppost, teeth chattering, wondering if pride was worth pneumonia. Then headlights. A black car pulled up. Window down. He was there. Dylan Mitchell, drenched in rain. No umbrella. Sleeves rolled to his elbows like he didn't care anymore. She stared at him. "You stalking me again?" she asked. He didn't smile. "I just needed to know you were okay." She didn't move. Didn't run. didn't fold, just looked at him, really looked at him, and then quietly stepped into the car. No words, no negotiations, just the quiet admission of a tired girl who couldn't keep pretending. Inside, the silence was soft. He handed her a towel from the back seat. "I always keep one now," he said, almost sheepishly. She wiped her face. "You look like hell." He glanced at her. "You always say the nicest things." She laughed once, just a puff of breath, and he watched her like she was air after a long drought. They didn't kiss. They didn't fight. They just sat there, breathing in the kind of closeness that didn't need declarations. Because when love is real, sometimes being near someone is the loudest way to say, "I still choose you." He had stayed in the shadows, not to hide, but to protect, and now, without a word, she finally saw him again. Chapter 8. Street Corner Confession. It started like any other morning. The sky was pale, the city already loud, and Sophia Carter was setting out her cooler with practiced hands. The ache in her shoulders had become background noise like the hum of buses, the static of sidewalk life. She hadn't seen Dylan in 3 days, since the storm, since the ride where neither of them spoke about what it meant for her to get in the car, or for him to wait in the rain without being asked. She told herself it didn't matter, that she didn't need him to show up again. But when she looked across the intersection, a quiet part of her hoped he would, and then he did. Not in a car, not in a suit, but on foot, wearing jeans and a black hoodie, like he'd stepped out of someone else's life. Like he belonged to no boardroom, no skyline, no empire, just this corner, just her. Sophia blinked. "Mitchell," she said. He didn't smirk, didn't posture, just held up 2 fingers. "2 waters," he said. She handed them over. "Slow. You're early. Didn't sleep. Big CEO deal keeping you up." "No." She raised an eyebrow. He stared at her. Not in the way people looked when they wanted something, but like she was the only thing keeping him from falling. "Come with me," he said. She blinked. "Excuse me." He nodded to the sidewalk. "Just a few blocks." "I'm working?" "You'll still be working." Sophia narrowed her eyes. "If this is some weird rich guy surprise, I swear, no games," he said gently. "Just follow me." She hesitated, then shut the lid on the cooler, locked the chain, and followed. Because something in his voice, something in the way he didn't try to charm her, made it impossible to say no. 3 blocks later, they arrived at a familiar corner. Her old corner, the first one she'd ever sold water from when she was 17 before college, before debt, before pride became armor. She hadn't been back in years. The air smelled like old tar and hot pretzels. The light hit the sidewalk, just like it had the day she made her first sale. And right in the center of it was a cooler, just like hers. A sign taped to it read, "Cold water, $2, help me learn to hustle." She turned to Dylan, stunned. "You didn't." "I did. You're going to sell water." "I already am." She blinked. "You're insane." "I'm in love." Her breath caught, and then he pulled a bottle from the cooler and shouted toward a pedestrian. "Cold water, $2. Best deal on the block." The woman smiled and bought one. Dylan handed over change like he'd done it 100 times. Sophia stared at him, speechless. He looked over at her and said, "If I can live in your world, maybe you can believe I never wanted to change it." She didn't move. Her hands were trembling, her heart louder than the traffic. And then slowly she stepped toward his cooler, grabbed a bottle, and held it out to the next passerby. $2, she called. "Hydrate or die." The man laughed and bought it. She looked at Dylan. He looked at her, and together for the first time they sold side by side. Hours passed. The sun dipped lower. Shadows stretched across the pavement, and their voices went hoarse from shouting. They laughed. They bumped elbows. They kept count of sales like it mattered more than stock prices. Sophia watched him, suit wrinkled, hair a mess, sweat on his forehead, and for the first time, saw not a billionaire, but a man, just a man. When the last bottle was gone, she sat on the edge of the curb, breathing hard. He dropped beside her. No limo, no bodyguards, just the smell of pavement and melted ice. She looked at him. "You know this doesn't fix everything, right? I know. You still can't buy your way into my life. I don't want to." She hesitated. Then, voice barely above a whisper, asked, "Why me?" Dylan didn't flinch. "Because from the second I saw you standing under the sun, selling water, like your life depended on it, I knew you were everything I'd spent my whole life missing." Her eyes burned, and for once, she didn't fight it, didn't fold her arms, didn't run. She leaned in and kissed him. Not like in the movies, not soft and slow, but like someone whose whole body had been waiting for permission to finally fall. When they pulled apart, his hand rested on her cheek. She smiled, a little breathless. "So, do I call this a confession or a collapse?" He smiled back. "Call it a beginning." He didn't ask for permission to love her. He just showed up until she finally let him stay. Chapter 9. You Can't Buy Me. Sophia hadn't been to Mitchell Enterprises in weeks. Not since the day she stormed out, and he didn't stop her. But this time, she wasn't storming in. She walked calmly, deliberately. She didn't need to cause a scene. The scene had already found her. It started with a whisper, a new rumor, one she hadn't wanted to believe, until she overheard it herself. "Did you hear? CEO Mitchell bought the restaurant where that girl works." Seriously, that's a little obsessive. Controlling? If you ask me. Sophia froze mid-step, coffee cup trembling in her hand. He bought the restaurant, the place where she scrubbed dishes, mopped floors, where she'd worked until her fingers bled. He bought it. Her body moved before her mind could stop it. Straight to his building, past the lobby, up the elevator, through the hall. No appointment, no warning. She didn't care. She pushed open his office door and found him standing by the window. Tie loosened, sleeves rolled. He turned at the sound. "Sophia," he said softly. "Didn't expect. Did you buy the restaurant?" He paused, then nodded. "Yes." Her stomach dropped. "Why?" "I wanted to make sure you were safe." She stared at him, incredulous. "Safe?" He took a step forward. "The manager was treating you like garbage. I had the means." "No," she snapped. "You had the power, and you used it like you always do without asking. I didn't want you to suffer. Then let me say this." So it's clear her voice broke, but her eyes did not. "I don't need to be rescued." Dylan's hands curled into fists at his sides. Not in anger, in restraint. "I wasn't rescuing you," he said. "I was loving you." Silence. The words hung there bruised and beautiful. She blinked. "Then why does it feel like control?" He stepped back, stunned. "You think I'm trying to own you. I think you're trying to help someone who never asked for it." He exhaled sharply. "So you'd rather drown than take my hand. I'd rather choose when to reach." Her voice cracked now. "Because this wasn't about the restaurant. It was about all of it. The tuition, the repairs, the job, the water bottles, even the hot dogs under the rain. It was all too much, too good, too impossible." She wasn't used to someone catching her fall before she hit the ground, and she didn't know how to accept it without losing herself. Dylan didn't argue, didn't raise his voice. He simply looked at her and said the words she never thought he'd say. "Then don't marry me." Her breath hitched. "What? If you think this love is something I'm trying to buy." He swallowed. "Then maybe you're not ready for what it really is." "Don't do that." "Do what?" "Make it sound like I'm the one who's broken." "You're not broken," he said gently. "You're just still building walls in places where doors are waiting to open." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "And what if I'm scared?" He stepped closer, softly, carefully. "So am I." They stood in silence, so close, and yet miles apart. And then she said it. The one thing he hadn't expected. "I can't marry you." The room went still. The air folded in on itself. His shoulders didn't move, but his eyes did, just slightly, enough to show the break. "Okay," he said. She wanted him to fight, to beg, to chase, but he didn't, and that shattered her. She turned to leave, but just before she reached the door, he said, "I wasn't trying to change you, Sophia. I was trying to make space for you in a life that never had room for anyone else." She didn't turn back, because if she did, she might stay, and staying scared her more than walking away. Outside, the wind hit her face like consequence. She walked fast, without direction, without purpose. The city moved on without her, but something inside her had stopped. Because for the first time in her life, She had walked away from something that felt like home. Back in his office, Dylan stood motionless, hands in his pockets, heart in pieces, and yet, somehow, he still loved her, even if she couldn't see it yet. Especially then, she didn't want a man who could fix her world. She wanted one who would stand in the brokenness and not leave. But maybe, just maybe, he already had. Chapter 10. The corner where it all began. It had been 12 days. 12 days since Sophia walked out of Dylan Mitchell's office and didn't look back. 12 days of waking up with her chest tight. 12 days of working late, avoiding her phone, pretending her heart hadn't left with him. But every time she passed that corner, their corner, she slowed. Because the air still smelled like summer pavement and sweat and something unspoken. Because that's where it all began. And something in her wanted it to begin again. Dylan had never been so still in his life. 12 days, 12 sleepless nights, 12 mornings where his tie stayed on the table and his thoughts stayed on a girl who sold water with more dignity than most men wore in their suits. He hadn't tried to find her, not this time, because love, real love, doesn't chase to prove it exists. It waits and hopes. But on the 13th day, something broke. And for the first time since she left, he stood on the sidewalk where it all began. Same street, same spot, cooler in front of him, handwritten sign taped to the side. Cold water, $2. Second chances are free. Sophia wasn't even sure what made her walk that way. She told herself it was coincidence, that she just happened to be on 6th Avenue, but her feet knew better. And when she turned the corner and saw him standing in the sun, cooler at his feet, sleeves rolled, selling water like he had nothing left to lose, she stopped breathing. He saw her, didn't speak, just held up a water bottle like it was peace. She walked slowly, each step unsure, each breath louder than traffic. When she reached him, she stared. "You're insane," she said. "Maybe you really brought your cooler out here. Had to make sure you'd find me." She looked at the sign, then back at him. "I don't need water." "Good," he said. "I didn't bring ice." She let out a breath, half laugh, half ache. "You can't just show up like this and expect it to fix everything." "I didn't come to fix it," he said. "I came to ask for another chance to feel it." Her eyes burned, but she didn't cry. Not yet. They stood there in silence, in the city's noise, in the place where everything had started with $2 and a bottle of water. And then, softly, she asked, "Why didn't you come after me?" He looked down, then up again. "Because you told me not to. I wanted you to anyway." "I know." She stepped closer. "Why now?" "Because I finally realized," he said. "I didn't want a life where I had to wait for permission to love you." Her voice broke. "You think it's that simple?" "No, but I think some things are worth the mess." She stood there, breath trembling, pride cracked wide open. And for the first time, without armor, she said, "I missed you." His hands didn't move. His voice didn't shake, but his eyes softened. "I missed you every day." She looked at the cooler, at the sign, at the spot where she used to stand, shouting through exhaustion. "This place," she said quietly, "it made me who I am." "I know, and you keep trying to pull me out of it." "No," he said. "I'm trying to stand in it with you." She looked up, his eyes full of rain and sunlight and something permanent, and she knew he wasn't offering a rescue. He was offering a home. She stepped closer. "Still charging $2 for you," he said, smiling softly. "Lifetime discount." She leaned in, brushed her lips against his, not a kiss of apology or heat, but of return, of yes. The city didn't pause. No music swelled, no stranger applauded. But in the quiet rhythm of a sidewalk and summer air, two people finally came home to each other. He stood where her story began. Not to rewrite it, but to prove he belonged inside it. No price tag on home. They didn't rush into a wedding, not because they weren't sure, but because, for once, they didn't need to prove anything to anyone. Sophia Carter kept working. She sold water on weekends, even after the scholarship came through, because it reminded her who she was before love softened her spine. Because some stories are worth remembering, especially the ones written in sweat and cracked pavement. Dylan Mitchell didn't try to change her anymore. Instead, He started changing the world with her. He funded community scholarships under her name anonymously. He launched a street vendor empowerment fund quietly. He didn't want applause. He wanted impact, and he wanted her beside him. The proposal came one morning, not with diamonds or candlelight, but in the form of 2 plastic chairs, 2 lukewarm coffees, and a question he'd been carrying like a promise. What if we just stayed like this, us? Together, no walls. Sophia smiled, fingers wrapping around the chipped ceramic mug. Then we're already home. They were married beneath the Brooklyn Bridge. Not in a ballroom, not in a villa, just there, surrounded by streetlights, folding chairs, and the people who had always stood by them when no one else did. She wore a $60 dress. He wore sneakers under his suit. They danced barefoot on concrete and laughed like the world had never broken them. Because love didn't save them. They saved each other by choosing to stay when it would have been easier to walk. By seeing through the fear, by learning that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is let someone in. And as they sat at the end of the night, legs dangling over the edge of the East River, wind in her hair, his hand on her knee, Sophia whispered, "You never bought me. Dylan, you earned me. Every minute you waited." He leaned over, pressed a kiss to her shoulder, and said the only words that ever mattered. "I would have waited forever." Some love stories begin with fireworks, but the ones that last start on street corners, with a bottle of water and a choice to stay. Have you ever loved someone not because they rescued you? If this story touched something deep inside you, the next one goes even further. It begins with a single mom, a crying child, and a billionaire who had everything but love. I'll be waiting for you there. Leave a comment, share your favorite moment, and if it felt real to you, you're not alone. See you in the next story.